The block today is the quarter square triangles, and it finishes at 12 inches. This block is a 4x4 grid. That means there are 16 spaces in the grid. Here's a picture of the grid. 16 spaces in the grid that need to be filled in with units. And in our case, they're all going to be quarter square triangles, and they all finish at 3 inches. Here is the block. It's 12 inches. Here are 4 blocks set together. And how I've set this up is 4 quarter square triangles. If I cover this up, we're calling this a pinwheel unit. Cover that. This is a pinwheel unit, and it's 4 quarter square triangles. So if you look at this unit, the background is the white, and the pinwheel is the darker color, and then the medium color is the sides of this pinwheel unit. And then we look here, and there's another one here, and then 2 more down here. So this block is made up of 4 pinwheel units, and each pinwheel unit has 4 quarter square triangles. We look at the patches, and there's only one patch. It's patch A. For rotary cutting, we cut 4 1/4 inch squares, cut the square in half diagonally twice to get 4. Now these patches over here are the dark and the medium. So the dark patches will make the pinwheels, and the medium patches will be the side pieces on the side of each unit. And we'll need to cut 4 of each of those. And then there's 32 patches of the background. So this is the rotary cutting, and it's also how many patches you need if you're going to use AccuQuilt. And I have 2 different dies here on the AccuQuilt. The first die, you can cut 8 patches at once, and it tells you how big to cut the fabric for the 8 patches. And then the second die is the one I'm going to use, and you cut 4 1/2 inch squares to make 4 patches. Now let's look at how we make quarter square triangles. Here's what a quarter square triangle is. In this coloring, we have the background patches are the same, and then we have our dark fabric, which is for the pinwheel, and our light fabric, which is for the side piece. So here is a quarter square triangle, and then we put 4 together to make the pinwheel unit. And then we have 4 of these units per block. When you're doing this method, is called 4 at a time and trim method. You'll take 4 pieces of fabric, piece them together. I have a demo at the end of this video, and you'll make 4 of the quarter square triangles at once. And these are set up to be made and then trimmed at the end to the size you need. Here are the units in this block. I put the quarter square triangle, which is 16 units, and that's the quarter square triangle unit on its own. And there are 16 of those. And I've also put the pinwheel unit. There are 4 of those, and here's the pinwheel unit, which is actually 4 quarter square triangle units. For the 12-inch block that we're making today, the quarter square triangles finish at 3 inches, and the pinwheel units finish at 6 inches. If you want a 16-inch block, here are the sizes, the finished sizes of the 2 different units. And here's an 8-inch, and there are the finished sizes. On page 2, I have this quarter square triangles reference sheet. This will be for the second method, where you make 4 quarter square triangles at a time, and we'll have a complete demo at the end of this video. These are the finished sizes, so you'll look and see what finished size you want, and you cut your squares this size, and then at the end you're going to trim to this size, and the center point is given here. And this is for when you're trimming. You'll use the center point measurement for doing the trimming. And then it has a diagram of what it looks like and how many pieces of fabric you need. You're always going to cut squares. You're always going to cut 4 squares, 1 for each of the quarter square triangles in the unit. Okay, before we get into the piecing part, I'm going to be piecing two different methods. I'm going to piece the rotary cut ones and the AccuQuilt cut ones. Half of the block will be rotary cut and the other half will be AccuQuilt. And I want to demo each of those, and then we'll just demo the other part of doing the quarter square triangles 4 at a time. But I wanted to show you this, that I read about this in the AccuQuilt. There's a blog, and one of the entries, the writer was talking about how she used cardstock, and I bought some. It's this, and it's in a big book. You open it up, and the cardstock has different color on each side, so you can play around with color as you're working with it. And I'll have a link to that in the description below the video. So here are your 4 pieces of fabric, just like we have here on the instructions. And these were cut with the AccuQuilt. So you can see your square, and if you are cutting with the rotary cutter, you also have a square that you cut in half diagonally twice. So you get these 4 pieces. These outside lines, edges, of the quarter square triangle are the lengthwise and crosswise grains, and the bias grain is on the inside here. So here is how you cut them if you're cutting rotary cutting or AccuQuilt. If you're doing the other method, the 4 at a time, these stay as squares. And what you're going to do is, in our case, we're choosing the white as the background, and then we're going to put one here for the pinwheel will be the pink here, and then the side unit will be that. And we'll just make each one. This is what we're going to do for our pinwheel unit. And you always put the long side of the triangle around the edge. So this shows you how you take 4 different pieces of fabric, cut them up into 4 pieces, and then put them together into 4 blocks. This is what you do. And let's see if we can get our pinwheel going here. Let's see, this goes like that. Then this goes like that. This goes like that. So now you see all the seam allowances are in there, but here's your pinwheel, and then you have your background fabrics, and you have your side pieces on the sides. And this is how we put together the quarter square triangle when you're doing rotary cutting or your AccuQuilt. So if you are cutting patches, these are our patches here we're cutting, then this is how you put it together. And what you would do is you take these 2 and sew them together, and then these 2, sew them together, and then sew the 2 halves together to get your quarter square triangle. The thing you have to watch about this is where you sew them together, because it's easy to get these confused like this. And that's maybe what you want some other time. This is really a half square triangle, and it's called a split quarter square triangle because it's a quarter square triangle split with a half square triangle if this were one piece. So anyway, my point is you have to watch what you're doing and be careful where you're placing the colors. I've just cut all my pieces for 2 of the pinwheel units on the AccuQuilt. I have 6 layers stacked here, 4 of the background and 1 each of the red and the blue. And I'll need another 1 each for the red and the blue. So I'll have a total for 2 pinwheel units. I'll need to have 4 backgrounds, 2 blues, and 2 reds. Then I'm just going to pull these off, and here are our pieces, and I'm going to separate those in just a minute. Now I'll go and cut the other 2 pieces. Okay, now I have all of my AccuQuilt pieces cut. I ended up with 2 different blues and the same red. And I have the same thing here. So I have 2 blues and 2 reds here and 4 of the backgrounds here. Now, these are the rotary cut ones, and on the page it says to cut the squares at 4 1/4 and then cut them twice diagonally. Now we have all of these pieces cut. So let's move these out of the way. And I'll start with the AccuQuilt pieces. We know we have 2 of the white, and then we have a blue and a red. So we have that one. I'm just going to lay out a few of them. Now what I'm going to do here is flip this over, and I'm going to match the 90-degree here. This side and this side. Match that, and then check the other sides, and then we're going to stitch 1/4 inch here and press the seam open. And we're going to do the same thing with this one. So here are the pieces sewn together, and I've got them pressed open. Now we're just going to match these and stitch along here. Match this line and stitch. Now with the AccuQuilt, they cut off the points here and here, and usually your stitching, your 1/4 inch, is going to begin right at this point and end right at this point. Now open it up and we'll press these seams open. I'm going through now and I'm going to stitch all of these that were cut with the AccuQuilt. Now this is all pressed and this unit is ready. And the good thing about making a test unit is you'll test out how you're going to sew it, but also you'll have this as a guide for stitching the rest of them. So what I'm going to do is take all of the reds and then the whites. So I'll look at this, how it's placed here, and it has a white here and a red here. And I'm just going to chain piece all the reds to whatever whites I need on here, because there's fewer reds than whites. Then I'll go through and do the same thing with the blue. I'll place them just how they are and stitch them, chain piece them. Then I'll go and press all of them and then stitch all of them together. Chain piecing. Now I'll go press these. Now I'm going to chain piece all of my red and whites to all of my blue and white. Chain piece these. Now I'll press them open and we'll put the pinwheel unit together. Here is the blue pinwheel finished, and the red pinwheel is here ready to be stitched. I'm going to stitch these 2 together, then these 2. Let's flip this over. When you put these together, you see how the seams go right into the corner on both of them. So you want to try to match where those seams are stacked on top of each other. It's hard to show this, but if you pull this back, you want those seams to look like this. So you want them to match all the way out to the edge. And try to do that on both sides here when you stitch your 1/4 inch. Because what that gets you is this here. So when you sew this to the next block, this point here is 1/4 inch from the edge. And same here. So that's what you want. And then when you have the corner or the center, you'll be able to match these with your pin. And I'll show you on this one how to use the pin to match these points so they'll look like that. Now I'll stitch this one together and I'll show you how to match the points. So we have our pieces here and we're going to stitch these 2 together. We want to have a nice points meeting all here in the center. So let's flip this over and we're going to look where these fabrics come together at a point. Now they don't match exactly here, so I'm just going to go between the 2. There's a little bit of a difference. I'm going to put my pin right there. Okay, then we pick this up And I'm going to find where these fabrics meet, the points meet here. Put the pin in, and then let's pick it up. And I'm matching the top edges here, and then over here. And we make sure the pin is perpendicular, straight in, not off to the side like that. Put it in the fabric. You're going to match these edges. Try to get your diagonals lined up here. Let's see if we got those. See how they kind of nest right here? And you want that all the way to the edge to match. Start here 1/4 of an inch and start aiming for where that pin goes in the fabric. Straighten out this side here and start going for your 1/4 of an inch off the edge. Okay, I tried to zoom in as much as I can here because I want to show you where I messed up the first time. So I started 1/4 of an inch and I came this direction, and I was too close to the edge of the fabric, this first top stitch right here. And then I stitched and made my 1/4 of an inch here. So when I checked it, I opened it, my points were floating. So I didn't like that. And so I just started another stitch here and just came down a little bit more right into that point. And then just kind of eased myself over here. So let's open this up. And there's our pretty points that match. If we come over here, we have these match. Over here, we have these match. And it'll look even better when it's pressed. So there's what the red pinwheel looks like. Now I'll go press this and we will start doing the rotary cut ones. Here are my rotary cut pieces, and I did a test unit. These will be stitched exactly the same as the AccuQuilt cut pieces. The only difference is you'll have these little nubs that you need to take off. These little nubs right here. And they're on all 4 corners. You can use your scissor or you can use your rotary cutter, but you'll want to trim them off all like that. And the only thing I do a little bit different when I'm stitching the rotary cut ones, I sew a scant 1/4 of an inch. I think I just need a little bit extra to make sure that I didn't cut them wrong or cut them a little bit off. So I sew a scant 1/4 of an inch on these. Now I'm going to stitch all of these, stitch the exact same way you did before with a chain stitching, and then trim off all the edges. Then we'll come back and make the pinwheel units. Now here are the 8 1/4 square triangle units, and I will sew them together into the pinwheel units, the 2 of them. There's virtually no difference in piecing these, the rotary cut versions as the AccuQuilt version. They're exactly the same. The only difference is when you finish these units with the rotary cutting, you'll have to cut off the nubs on all 4 of the corners. So here's the block, and it's hard to see, it's difficult to see the pinwheels. I think that if you go more darker with the pinwheels and lighter with the other fabric, then the pinwheels will stand out more if you like that. Because sometimes if you look at this, all you see are the 1/4 square triangles. Maybe because that's what we've been doing all day. But anyway, here is the block. Now, if you stay tuned, this is a video that I did about a year ago, and it shows you how to do 4 at a time 1/4 square triangles. For this method, we're going to cut squares larger than we need, and when we're done piecing the unit, we're going to trim them down to the size we need. Now these are cut 5 inches each, and for our block, I want a 3-inch finished unit. And if you look at this 1/4 square triangle unit, you'll see that 2 of the fabrics are repeated and they're opposite of each other. You can do this, or you can choose 4 different fabrics if you like. So these are the fabrics that are going to be duplicated in the unit, and these are going to be the other ones. You'll take the lighter squares and you're going to draw a diagonal line across on the back side. Put these together, right sides together, and then we're going to stitch 1/4 of an inch on either side of this drawn line. Now we've stitched a 1/4 inch on either side of the diagonal line, and we're going to cut them apart on the diagonal line. Once you cut them apart, you're going to press toward the fabric that's duplicated. In this case, it's the blue fabric. So on all 4 of these pieces, press toward the blue fabric. And normally I would tell you to cut off these nubs, but we're going to leave them on because they won't get in our way with this. So now we're going to put these 2 pieces together and these 2 together. And we're going to put them, match the seam allowances or the seam lines, and use your fingers to feel how they lock in place, and you'll see that they are opposite like this. So that's, you know, you've got it right. And don't worry if these don't match up perfectly, because they're going to be cut off later. Now to draw this diagonal line, instead of going from one diagonal to the other, one point to the other, we're going to use our seam line as a guide. So we're going to lay one of the ruler markings along the seam line that we just sewed, and we're going to try to get as close as we can to the point. And again, it doesn't matter because we're going to be trimming them later. And now we're going to draw another diagonal line across these stitches. And I like to put 2 pins in. Now I learned to sew first in the direction going against this, where the seam is pressed. You see it's pressed this way, so we're going to start our first stitching down this way. And I'm told that it helps keep it in position. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the way I've learned how to do it. Now we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch on either side of this drawn line, and you do that for the other set as well. Now you've sewn on either side of the drawn diagonal line, and we're going to cut on the diagonal line. Now when we open them up, we'll have our 1/4 square triangle units. Now you can press toward one direction if you like. If you want to reduce the bulk in the center, I'll show you how to do that. If you look at the stitch we just sewed, this one, and you look at these stitches right above that line, we're going to take those out. And then flip it over, and you're going to take the same ones out on the other side. Now this allows you to press the seam like this. So you're going to open up, those stitches are out, so it opens up that seam like this, right in the center. And then you can press, your pressing will be in a clockwise direction. So this will be pressed down and this will be pressed up. Or you can just press to one side, whichever you like. And here are the back sides all pressed, and you see it has a little 4 patch in the center, and the pressing is all done either in a clockwise or a counterclockwise direction, whichever you've pressed. Now we're going to trim these up to the size we need, and in this case we're going to trim them up to 3.5 inches. Also in the chart that you downloaded is the measurement you're going to use to trim these down. So if you want a 3.5 inch finished, you're going to take half of that, which is 1 3/4 inches, and you're going to start measuring from the center out 1 3/4 inches and trim there on all 4 sides. Now we want to trim this to 3.5 inches square, and we're going to do our measurement using this diagonal line and the center of the block. So half of 3.5 inches is 1 3/4 inches. You're going to use the 45-degree angle on your ruler and line it up with this 45-degree angle. Then you're going to find the 1 3/4 inches, which is right here. So you keep the angle on this diagonal line here, and this is the 1 3/4 inch right there. And I'm going to slide that up until that 1 3/4 inch reaches the center of the block, the very center. So if you can see, The 45-degree angle is lined up here. And then this is the 1 3/4 inch line right there. And now we just trim off this end and flip it over. Or at this point, you can measure your 3.5 inches. And make sure that the 1 3/4 is lined up right here in the center. So here's your 3.5 inches and your 1 3/4 right in the center, and trim this. Now flip this around again, and we're going to trim these two sides. Same way, 45-degree angle on the stitching line, and look for your 1 3/4, which is right there, right here. So it's lined up, and then we're going to trim this edge off. Flip it around and trim it to 3.5. And make sure your 1 3/4 is right here on the center line. And make sure these are even too. Okay, so there is your 3.5 inch quarter square triangle, and do that to all the quarter square units.